We're in Matthew chapter 13. In 1992, I was 8, Lego introduced only the most coolest Lego castle ever. And I say that confidently as a Lego fan. The Black Knight's Castle. I own it. This was the coolest castle that they had come out with. As you can look, and they described it, oh my word. Look, it comes with 4 knights. It comes with all these little men with like crossbows and bow and arrows and stuff. I'm not even done yet. Look at this. See, those are the cool knights. Okay? And look, see right here is this drawbridge that comes out. So here, I'll show you. See the drawbridge? You had a little crank, and it lowered it down. It was so cool. Okay, and they advertised this, and like they really hadn't used anything of like this rising scale before. They, inside it, there was actually a jail where you could throw this naughty wolf pack guy in there. Where is he? He's right. What? I forgot to get a picture of him. Okay, and so anyways, you could throw the bad guy. What was really cool about this castle was, you guys see this right here? There was a glow in the dark ghost. And so, look at this back door. In case the castle was under siege, they could sneak away. See him, doody. And see, look, the drawbridge. What's so funny? Doody.
Do you still have it?
Yeah. You kidding me? Of course I still have it. It's like the coolest thing ever. So there's no way I'm getting rid of it. Sorry, like when I die, it's gonna be buried with me, okay? So I'm gonna try to pull an Egyptian pharaoh going on. Okay, so anyways, it was really exciting. So when they released this Lego castle, Black Knight's Castle, by the way, okay? And no, mine is not for sale, because I know you all want it now, okay? And so they made sure to advertise to poor little 8-year-old me about how I needed to have this castle. I needed so much. I'm pretty sure my parents knew that if I didn't get it, all my hopes and dreams of a good childhood were shot. They were gone, okay? It was that important to me, all right? And so Lego spent all this time advertising how cool this castle is gonna be. And they made sure you knew it had this awesome green display thing that you build the castle on. It talked about the awesome knights and the drawbridges, and you could defend yourself against the wolf pack, and they were the bad guys. And oh man. And as a kid, I had to have it. Look at that. Just bask in all its awesomeness, please. See, Lego spent a lot of time describing the characteristics of this castle. So much so that me, as an 8-year-old child, could not live without it. Jesus, through his use of parables, gives us a glimpse of his kingdom. And it's much cooler than the Black Knight's Castle. And he spends the entire chapter of Matthew 13. And he uses these parables, which we learned last week are simple stories with a deeper spiritual meaning. It says Matthew chapter 13, verse 34, all these things Jesus said to the crowds in parables. Indeed, he said nothing to them without a parable. And this was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter what has been hidden since the foundation of the world. And here in this chapter, Matthew has brought together these descriptions of the kingdom of heaven. And we are going to spend time here today uncovering what has been hidden. We're going to see how God has presented the kingdom of heaven. And I find that as I studied, and maybe you have gotten this connection as a parent, have you ever tried to explain something a little more complicated to your children? And you don't use the complicated scientific definitions or anything like that. What do you try and communicate to your kids with? A story, an illustration, well, you remember when such and such did this, or you know how this does this, and we use pictures to go, and that helps the child when they're thinking of more complicated topics to actually get an idea of what this is. And the kingdom of heaven is so beyond our imagination. I don't think it can be described with simple words. It has to be described in pictures. And we have to sort of catch it. We have to get a feel for it. We have to see, wow, this is incredible. And that is what he uses. And that's what Matthew does in Matthew chapter 13. He brings these pictures together. Depending on who you talk to, Matthew chapter 13 either has 7 or 8 simple stories, and it's because number 8 is debated, all right? He has 7 or 8 simple stories that illustrate the kingdom of heaven, and we are going to spend time here this morning sort of unlocking that and unpacking how Jesus is communicating the kingdom of heaven to his disciples as well as to the crowds. So last week, we saw this. All right, we talked about the 4 soils. Do you guys remember verses like 1 through 23? We talked about the 4 soils and what it meant. And ultimately, we saw that there were 3 soils that no fruit was able to bear. The thorns would strangle out the seeds of the word of the kingdom, or it would be on rocky ground and grow real quick, and then the sun would beat it out, and it would go. Or sometimes it would just grow on the road, and as you know, seeds don't really grow on the road. And so what's going on? And then there was the healthy soil that eventually led and bore fruit. And it depends. And when we talked about how each of us struggles at times with a heart like this. And how sometimes we bear fruit and sometimes we don't. And really what ultimately we come down to is if you're going to be part of the kingdom of heaven, it depends on if fruit is being born in your life. Have the seeds landed on good soil and is bearing God's fruit in your life? And so citizenship in the kingdom of heaven depends on the soil of your heart. That's another way of looking at what we talked about last week. I know I'm not going to repeat that sermon. We move on to verse 24. And many of you studied that here this week in your community groups. Verse 24 says, he put another parable before them, saying, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. That is messed up. You thought about that? See, you're growing a little home garden and your neighbor really doesn't want you to succeed and throw seed, a whole bunch of dandelions into your garden overnight. That'd be war. Okay? And so when the plants came up and bore grain, and the weeds also appeared also, and the servants of the master of the house came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your feet? Master, did you plant these? No, we didn't. That doesn't make any sense. Why would I plant weeds? How then does it have weeds? And he said to them, an enemy has done this. So the servants said to him, then do you want us to go and gather them? And so the servants were like, hey, do you want us to gather all the weeds up now? He said, no, lest in gathering the weeds, you root up the wheat along them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And at the harvest time, I will tell the reapers, gather the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. So the guy was like, hey, let them grow. Because at this stage, if you go in and start pulling them out, you might actually pull up some of the grain. Don't do that. Let them grow to full size. Let them grow. Let them both go. And then at the end of the harvest, when it's time to bring everything together, then we will see weed, grain. And then the explanation of this is in verse 36. And then he left the crowds and went into the house. And his disciples came to him saying, explain to us this parable of the weeds of the field. And he answered, the one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed is the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels. Just as weeds are gathered and burned with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all causes of sin and lawbreakers, and throw them into the fiery furnace, in that place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Remember that. When he says he who has ears to hear, he's like, okay, I need you to slow down a little bit. I need you to listen carefully to what I've just said. Spend time pondering, what am I saying? Turn on your spiritual ears and listen. And what we see is the kingdom of heaven will have enemies until the time of the harvest. As the Son of Man is going and sowing and trying to bring people into his kingdom, there's an enemy there that is literally planting saboteurs in it. I thought it was very fascinating, and all this talk about the kingdom of heaven, and a lot of times we think, okay, kingdom of heaven, Christians, that's it. But there's actually a feel in here where Jesus is talking about the kingdom of heaven, and he says, send his angels, cause us, throw them on the fire in that place. What verse? The field is like the weeds. There we go, verse 41. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all lawbreakers. And that's this idea that within the kingdom and the realm and the plan of God right now, there is a mixture of those who are Christ or Jesus followers and those who are not. And there will be, for the entire time of the harvest and the seed planting, there's going to be two sides. And have you guys met a nice weed? Ever? Come on. No. Those things are annoying. And if we could, we'd pull out our flamethrowers and burn them all. But then we'd burn the grass. Good thing we're not Jesus. Because Jesus waits until the end. Where things like, okay, now is the time I will separate. Now is the time I will bring those who have followed me and those who are not. And I will go and I will separate them. And what's also interesting about this is the kingdom is still functioning in the midst of its aggressors and enemies and those who want it to end. See, the master didn't say, all right, well, we're just going to get rid of that crop and burn it all because it got messed up by a weed. No, the grain still grew. The wheat still grew, but the grain and the harvest still grew. At the end, they will be taken away. And so many of you guys say that. And so the kingdom of heaven will have enemies until the time of the harvest. Look at this next one in verse 31. He put another parable before them, saying, and this is technically parable 3 and 4 for those of you who are keeping count. He put another parable before them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed. Have you gotten a theme here? How he says the kingdom of heaven is like the kingdom of heaven can be compared to the kingdom. So he's trying to paint this picture, okay? He's trying to help us to just catch a glimpse of it. I think the kingdom of heaven is something that is not necessarily taught, but it's very often caught by people. And I think it's so much that way in the regards to our parenting. You can teach and teach and teach and teach and teach and teach and teach, but they catch it. So teaching, I think this is like, it's like this. Here it is. We're just trying to get a sense of it. He says, so the kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed that a man took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it has grown, it is larger than all the garden plants and becomes a tree. So the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. He told him another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven that a woman took and hid in 3 measures of flour till all was leavened. So look here. So the kingdom of heaven might seem insignificant right now, but just wait. Just wait a little bit. So he gives us it. Here in verse 31 and 32, he says, the kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed. Now, I looked online, and a mustard seed, can you guys see the tip of my pen? No. It's a little bigger than that. It's like a millimeter. Like 10 of those equal a centimeter, I believe. And then a centimeter is, or an inch is 2.5 centimeters. Thank you, geometry class, 9th grade. So that's how tiny it is. Now, when you look at that, I mean, we know better because we are enlightened, but when you look at that seed, how big of a plant do you think a mustard seed would grow, being teeny, so teeny? I mean, does it grow jars of mustard? I mean, how does it? Dijon, Grey Poupon mustard, I don't know. But it's really tiny, and so you don't think much about it. I mean, you can look at it, and I went online to see how much it would cost if I bought a whole bundle of mustard seed, like a bag of mustard seed, and I was going to give you each mustard seed. And then I was like, nah, I ain't doing that. Here's a seed, okay? It's really, 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 really tiny. What's really fun about it is, there you go. This is a wild-looking tree. So he starts off, and I found out that actually they can actually grow, depending on which type, blah, 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 9 feet tall. And I've even heard that sometimes they can grow up to 20 feet. It's like 9, so it's like a big bush, big giant tree bush thing. So one of these things where if you grew in your backyard, you probably have to trim it all the time because it just keeps growing. And so you might think it's a little bit insignificant right now, but just wait a little bit. Just wait. The kingdom of heaven, as you have looked at it, you and the disciples and the nation of Israel were expecting something big and awesome right now. Right now, where's the kingdom? Why haven't we stormed and conquered Rome yet? Why haven't we done all this stuff? We expect something to happen right now. Jesus is like, hold your horses. It's going to take a little bit. It's going to seem really small. It's going to seem like nothing is going to happen. You're going to look at that. You're like, aw, you're a teeny little thing. Whoa. It's going to grow. It's going to take some time. And he also uses another one, which, leaven oftentimes in the Bible is actually sort of a reference to sin. The Jews, when they thought of leaven, they thought of sin. That was the spiritual picture behind leaven, because leaven, I learned in baking class back in home ec when I was in 7th and 8th grade, when I was making pretzels. Like, the big giant pretzels that I would then soak in powdered sugar because I was in 7th grade. Who am I joking? I would do that now. Okay, so they grow. And so we're talking, you add a little leaven and it goes boop, and it poofs up. And as a kid, that was pretty cool. And so he says the kingdom of heaven, so he told them another parable, the kingdom of heaven is like leaven that a woman took and hid in 3 measures of flour. That's about like 3 bushels, and that is about 144 cups of flour. So ladies, you guys know cups and flour and stuff, and I'm like, the only time I use a cup is when I'm making brownies, and it's a cup of water. Done, I got this, okay. And so you have a cup, all right? And you guys thought about that? So imagine like this giant bag of, huge bag of flour. And this lady, I love the imagery, just hides it in the flour. It goes and hides it. And when you hear this, you're like, wait a minute. Leaven is usually like sin. So this would have really caught people off guard if they're listening. Think about this is a Jewish audience, and they're listening, they're like, wait a minute. This lady stuck the leaven in the flour. She hid it. That is naughty. That is really naughty. What if they didn't want it to rise? Too late now. It's in there. It's been hidden. And so so I looked online for a recipe of bread, okay? Bread, basic bread recipe that I found uses 5.5 cups of flour. And so this thing would make about 52 loaves of bread. That's like a loaf of bread a week. So for a village, that amount of bread would actually feed the village. And this once again highlights that, see, it might seem insignificant now, but just like leaven sort of like gets in and permeates, and it's going to grow. And it's going to surprise people how fast and how big this grows. Could you imagine the ignorant baker? Here it comes. See, the kingdom of heaven is going to start small, insignificant. It's not really going to do much right now, but it's sitting there. And eventually it's going to grow, and it's going to start growing. It's going to start, it's going to start taking over stuff. It's going to ultimately feed an entire village. Not only that, this kingdom of heaven is also, as it says, it's larger than all the garden plants. So it starts off being the smallest garden plant. It's not going to do much, and eventually becomes a tree. And that tree, it started off so small, but it became so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. Eventually, that mustard seed actually grows larger and bigger than all the other fruit in the garden. The kingdom of heaven is like this. It starts off small. You might not see the impact right now. And I'll be honestly, sometimes you can listen to the news and you wonder if God is still at work. And we are a mess. Stupidly, I woke up this morning and I decided to read the news. Stupid. You leave depressed. What has God done? Just left us? See, it might be insignificant right now. We might not be able to see it, but you know what? Just like that leaven, it's sneaking, it's growing, it's happening, it's working, it's moving, it's doing something behind the scenes, and we can trust and rely that just like that mustard seed that's gonna grow, be like, that's not gonna do anything. Boosh, tree. Whoa, God did have a plan this whole time. Yes, he did. So that's it, all right? So this next one we see is in verse 44. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered up. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. I really like this parable. In Colorado, just southwestish, yes, of Colorado Springs, there was a town by the name of Cripple Creek. It was like gambling town, like crazy, okay? And it was like the third largest city in Colorado until a giant fire burned it to the ground. The whole town. Nikki and I visited there and stuff, and we learned a lot about the gold mines and stuff. It was you have like the 49ers with the gold rush in Colorado. Well, or California. There was a gold rush in Colorado. And what would happen is these really rich people would go in and buy entire mountains with the idea that they're going to mine in them for the gold, okay? Well, people would sneak onto property and try to find the gold before they found the gold. They knew they weren't going to be able to buy the land from the rich guy. There's no way he's going to sell that because he was thinking there was gold there. But they'd go in and sneak in. And sort of the idea of what's going on here. But this guy goes in, and we don't know why he's digging, but he stumbles across something, just making his way around the field. And he's going, and he maybe trips over something, and it's like buried treasure. It's like the lotto right there at his feet. And he finds treasure, and we don't know what it is, but I want you to imagine like Pirates of the Caribbean treasure, okay? Oh, singing to you, right? Wow, of course you'd say that, okay? Close it back up, and then what do? You look around. And you marry on your way. And you go and he sells everything he has. And he's like, I would like to buy some land. Well, where? That piece. Why? Because I just want to buy it. I want to buy that set of land. It's like, whatever, that's worthless land anyway. Besides, could you imagine the guy selling, what good is this land? You're selling everything that you have to buy land. Everything that you have. Your house, your home, your horses, your cattle, everything you have to buy this plot of land. You are an idiot, sir. That makes no sense. You know how happy he is? I can just rebuy my house and rebuy all my, cattle and stuff. And so I said this because the kingdom of heaven it might seem a little wacky. Because this would be nuts. From an outside perspective, could you imagine somebody going up? I've sold everything. I want that plot of land. Okay. This guy's weird. Whoa. All right. Then he comes back with, I would like to buy all my stuff back, sir. And all of your land as well. I mean, boom. See, from a human perspective, it can seem a little weird. Following Jesus from a world perspective is a little wacky. You got to be a little odd. I'm sorry, guys, but most of you are really odd. I'm the normal one. Right, so anyway, so that's it. So it's a little wacky. And so I like this one because Jesus is like, hey, it's going to seem a little weird. You're giving everything you have. For the world, they're looking at this, why are you wasting your time? What is the point of investing in this thing and buying in this thing? It's wacky, but it's worth it. And he builds on this idea a little bit more here in verses 45 and 46. And he said, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls, who on finding one pearl of great value, went and sold all that he had and bought it. So this guy, a search of fine pearls, this guy, he's like one of those, he's a jeweler. Wow, I cannot say that word. Yeah. Nikki, I'm going to have to practice this with you. Jeweler. Okay, jeweler. This guy was constantly in search of fine pearls, okay? Fine jewelry, something of significance. And so in order to exchange and to go and to be in this business, you had to have a little bit. Because as you know, you buy stuff on the low end, wait till they get more valuable. It's just like trying to buy gold and everything else. And jewelry and diamond values, I guess, they go up. And then the Chinese create artificial diamonds, which completely destroy the market. And, and so it's just it, all right? And so it's constantly up and down. Well, so this guy is in search of the jewel of jewels, the pearl of pearls, this pearl of incredible value. And he finds it. We don't know where, but he had to sell all that he had to buy because so someone else had it. And he sees it and he's like, that's it. And he goes and he sells everything he has to buy it. Now, think about this. If he is selling everything he owns to buy this one jewel, his jewelry trade is done. He's not going to look for anything else. He has it. It's done. But to him, this pearl was of that much value that it was worth it. And so I look at this. The kingdom of heaven is priceless. It is worth everything you can give to invest in it. I mean, it is worth, in a way, going broke here on earth to get something that is worth that much. Because in one sense, you don't have anything else. But in another sense, you have something that is worth everything. Just like the kingdom of heaven is like this. It is worth it. It is worth that investment into. And this last one's in verse 47. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea, gathered fish of every kind. And when it was full, men drew it ashore and sat down and sorted the good into containers, but threw away the bad. So it'll be at the end of the age. The angels will come out and separate the evil from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace, in that place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And so this kingdom of heaven is being described as a net that is being thrown into the sea. And as fishermen go and as they sail around, they will grab entire schools of fish. They'll bring them in. And as they bring them in and land, I'm sure they're going to look. And, just like things in the ocean, they'll have probably caught some things they wish they hadn't have caught. Like boots, shoes, some weird-looking fish. I went... bottom fishing and stuff with Jim a couple of times out in the ocean. And occasionally, it's ling cod. You will catch them, and they will be green. Like weird neon bluish green. You know what I'm talking about, Clyde? I think you're there. Yeah, exactly, okay? And so it's this really weird. And so you look at the fish, and it's like, oh, this thing is hideous. Like, no, it's because they eat this and this and this. It's actually just fine. But if I were a fisherman, the bright neon radioactive fish would go back, okay? So, but however they determine it, they have determined that there are good fish and there are bad. There are fish they wanted to keep and fish they did not want to keep. That there are things, and so they sorted them. And so the kingdom of heaven is like this net that has been thrown in, and full men drew to shore, and it's time. This is it. And they open it up, and you have the good fish and you have the bad fish, and they sort the good fish and get them into containers to sell and to be used and to be profitable. And then they get rid of everything else, and they're just going to end up throwing them into a furnace. This is where the kingdom of heaven gets real. We can think of all this nice, happy stuff. But the kingdom of heaven will one day reserve and one day punish the bad at the end. You see how he described it there? It will be a place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Like nails on a chalkboard, you know that sound? Like when you gnash your teeth and you clench and you're trying not to, and it hurts, and inside your head hurts because you're crunching down so hard. I had a filling that they had to take and drill in, and we learned that day that a pain medicine doesn't work on my face. There was nothing else they could do. So they just stick a thing in your mouth, and you just clench down. And you just keep clenching. And then they ask you questions, and your jaw is so tired because you're in so much pain you can't talk. Because your jaw has been clenched down so hard. And this place here, this place is so terrible. The people are gnashing their teeth in pain and they're weeping. And this is the punishment that is reserved for people who reject the kingdom of God. There will come a time, there will come a day where God comes back, and now is the time, and that harvest will be reaped. And just like how we described getting rid of the weeds, there will come a time and a place where he will come, and the angels will come and separate the evil from the righteousness, and there will be a separation there, and he will throw the bad and the evil into a place of fire where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Think about that imagery. See, the kingdom of heaven right now allows good and bad to live side by side. God's plan isn't thwarted. He is still working and using and moving in the lives of people. He is still at work. And from mustard seeds, he's growing incredible harvest in the lives of Christians and people who follow him. But one day God will come back. In essence, he will purify the kingdom, and he will get rid of the evil and those who have tried to thwart him and prevent his kingdom from going. There will come a time where he will come, and he will do that. And it is going to be a terrible, sad time. And so these are the 7 parables that he has given. And he asked them there in verse 51. For some reason, this really caught my eye. He says, "Have you understood all these things?" And this is a powerful question because he's asked them very specifically, you have ears to hear, let them hear. And he tells them, and he asks them, he says, do you understand what I'm telling you here about the kingdom of heaven? And they said to him, yes. Yes, we understand that. We in essence believe that, God. We we see it and we understand, the ramifications of what you're saying here, and how there's, there will be a time of great blessing and harvest, and there will be a wonderful time, but there's also a very bad time where it comes. Yeah, we understand that. See, so I want to summarize the kingdom of heaven right now for us. The kingdom of heaven is the organization of God that he is currently building on top of the grace, at that time, the future grace and work of Jesus Christ as Israel's Messiah and Savior of the world. The kingdom of heaven is the home for all those who trust in Jesus, but its current inhabitants are those who believe, and as of right now, those who do not believe. I know there's a lot of terminology in regards to the kingdom of heaven. Is it going on now, etc.? And based on this, I believe in some facet, it is currently going on right now. Because there are good and there are bad. There are Christ followers and there are not. And so it's currently in some form happening now. But just like he's already said in the parables, it looks a little bit insignificant right now. I don't really see a big castle. I don't really see a big kingdom going on. But it's the setup. God is working right now, and one day he's going to literally bring all Gentiles, all Jews together at the end, and it's going to be party, okay? And so it's the home for all those who trust in Jesus. So one day the kingdom will remove those who refused to bow to Jesus. And his kingdom that is going to happen then will transcend the imagination of all people and prove that investing in it was worth it, because there will be eternal, priceless rewards. And the first question I want to ask is, have you committed to following Jesus today? And so this is before the cross. This is before Jesus Christ has actually died on the cross. And so when they would trust, they were trusting and following in Jesus, not understanding that one day he would die. No one really understood that. So Jesus' claim is, are you trusting this, that Jesus was the king of the kingdom of heaven? By trusting and relying and following and believing him, you are placing yourselves in citizenship in the kingdom. Jesus Christ many times asked his people to sell what they had and invest and commit everything they could, because it was an act of faith to do that. Realize you can't trust the human possessions and what's going on. He was really trying to illustrate that for the people, that this is worth it. Following the king and the future kingdom is worth it. You might not see the benefits now. Many Christians back then, a lot of them died. They will one day get to see that play out. So they gave everything they had, their life, everything to that cause of Jesus. And now us, after the cross, can look back and we are still faced with the same question. Do we trust and follow and believe Jesus and what he has said and what he has done for us? The terminology is a little bit different. See, because we think Gentiles and there's the church, and so we don't think as Gentiles this kingdom. We don't think like that. Israel did. That was very common. That was the very thing that God pretty much drove into their minds all through the book of the Old Testament. So we're not thinking necessarily king. You can believe that Jesus Christ is king. But there's a way where we just recognize that he is Lord, he's our Savior. He's done so much. God, I believe and I trust and I want to follow you. And like I said, it starts small, but then it grows into something amazing. And many of you guys in your life can actually testify to God working in your life in that way. It started small. You didn't quite understand what trusting in Jesus would mean. And years later, you're like, whoa, I'm a completely different person. It's awesome. So that's the first thing. But there's the second thing here Jesus explains in verse 52. And so this is that eighth sort of parable-ish. Because he's not speaking necessarily to the crowds. He's very specifically speaking to the Gentiles. But there's still an imagery there that he's bringing out. And he says to them, therefore, every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like a master of a house who brings out of his treasure what is new and what is old. Scribes were considered the teachers of the law. They taught the word of God to people in Israel. Scribes served as lawyers, judges. They copied documents, but they weren't necessarily limited to that. So scribes during that time were a lot of times they were lawyers because they're the ones who's writing down and scribing laws. They didn't have copiers. They didn't have printers. By being literate and educated, they became experts of the law. And they served, in essence, the role that computers do nowadays. They were like, here's a parable, they were like Googles. If you wanted an answer about the law, you asked the scribe. They would Google it. They would scribble it, okay? They would know this. That's what a scribble it. Yep, so I'm going to make a new website called Scribble. Nobody copy that idea? I will know. All right, so that's it. So they were like, this is the role of scribes. And so he says, he's therefore a scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like a master of a house. And he's saying this to the disciples, by them becoming experts and knowledgeable on the kingdom of heaven, they were like scribes. They were now authority figures of the kingdom of heaven. They understood something not even other scribes knew. And as a result, what he says is he says, you can bring out of your treasure, out of your house, the treasures in your house, what is new and what is old. And I find that really cool because the disciples had an incredibly unique responsibility when they get. So if you've read the New Testament, how many times have you noticed Old Testament truth being like, I don't say reinterpreted, but being understood in a little bit different way in light of what is new? It's all over the New Testament. Paul does it a lot. You can just read the book of Galatians and you'll see it. And so the disciples had an incredibly unique privilege of knowing what is new, and that is the kingdom of heaven that no one really understood in the past. And they have the new, and now they also have the old, which is the Old Testament. And they have an incredible responsibility to bring the truth, the old and the new together, and give out that treasure. Now, we are not disciples. We are not the disciples of Jesus that became apostles, but we still do have a responsibility like them, where we can, in a way, serve as scribes of the kingdom of heaven. We have a responsibility to bring out the new and the old for the people in our circles. Not all of us are teachers. Not all of us can sit down and teach, but you know what I can tell us? Every single one of us knows someone who is a teacher and someone who can share the gospel. Do you guys know somebody who can share the gospel? Come on. Okay, look, you can use me for the love of Pete, okay? I love to share, but the fact is, we can do it, but if we're not confident in that yet, we can invite somebody, hey, will you just come and listen to such and such explain the gospel to you? I'm not asking all of us to become full-out super scribes for Jesus. I am asking you to you have an incredible opportunity of representing the old and the new. We get to do that. And so we can draw from this. As the disciples were given a very unique opportunity of being the ones to present treasure of the old and new to people, I think we can take a step back and look at it the exact same way. We have a unique opportunity to represent the plan of God and what God is doing in our life. And we can share what is old and new and the treasures and the harvest of what God has done in us. And we can